Awache, Tansei, Sego, Ani, and hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in from wherever you are this evening. My name is Laura Mcphee. I'm a Two-Spirit member of Pigwaknagan First Nation and mixed German and settler descent. I also work with Right to Play's Indigenous Programs team. I'm honored to be here tonight for a special episode of Right to Play in Conversation, powered by National Bank. Tonight we're talking about truth and reconciliation, and we invite you to be active participants in this conversation by using emojis, commenting in the chat, and asking questions. We have a very powerful panel of talented and caring humans with me tonight. So first, please join me in welcoming a representative of our generous corporate sponsor, National Bank, Geneviève Povin.
Yes, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, warm welcome to you, and thank you for being with us tonight. I wondered if you would open the space with a land acknowledgement and share a few words on behalf of National Bank.
Sure. So, Kwei, everyone. And just before I begin, je tiens d'abord à reconnaître les peuples autochtones de tous les territoires sur lesquels nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui. Même si nous nous rencontrons sur une plateforme virtuelle, je souhaite prendre un moment pour souligner l'importance du territoire que nous considérons tous comme notre patrie. Ce faisant, nous réaffirmons notre engagement et notre responsabilité envers l'amélioration des relations entre les nations et l'accroissement de notre propre compréhension des peuples autochtones, locaux et bien sûr de leur culture. D'un océan à l'autre, nous reconnaissons les territoires ancestraux et non cédés de tous les Inuits, Métis et Premières Nations qui considèrent ce pays comme leur patrie. Je vous invite à vous joindre à moi pendant ce moment de réflexion pour reconnaître les torts et les erreurs du passé et pour sonder aux façons dont nous pouvons, chacun à notre manière, aller de l'avant dans un esprit de réconciliation et de collaboration. National Bank is very proud to present Right to Play in Conversation honoring truth and reconciliation. Being myself of Métis descent from Master Yash in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, I hide my origin for many years, being scared about bias and judgment. This webinar will be an insightful and important conversation on truth and reconciliation. Our panelists will speak about how we can walk in partnership with Indigenous communities across Canada. It is also important to acknowledge the historical legacies of colonization in Canada and how colonial systems still impact Indigenous peoples today. Together, we can be an active ally and participant in reconciliation to make a positive impact on society, and also make sure that going forward, our kids will be very proud of their roots. I truly believe that inclusion and diversity are the wealth of our country. And today, before we start the panel, I'd like to share with you a very special announcement from Laurent Ferreira, our COO at National Bank of Canada. And seriously, thank you for your precious time. And I wish you a very great conference, guys.
Bonjour, hello, everyone. Over the past few years, National Bank has been supporting Right to Play, and we are proud to contribute to the organization's mission, particularly its programs that are offered to over 70 Indigenous communities across Canada to improve access to programs that empower First Nations, Inuit, and Métis youth. I am proud to announce that National Bank will continue to support Right to Play and will donate $450,000 to power the Right to Play Indigenous Program, co-chaired by Eva Hill and Sean St. John. We will also continue to support the Heroes Gala, which raises funds to help children rise above adversity through the power of play. La Banque nationale est très fière de poursuivre sa collaboration avec Right to Play. C'est une organisation remarquable qui contribue à améliorer la confiance des jeunes et leur permet de s'épanouir. Notre don permettra de soutenir le programme autochtone de Right to Play afin qu'ensemble, nous puissions créer un impact positif dans la vie des jeunes. Merci à toute l'équipe de Right to Play pour votre dévouement à la cause.
Miigwech, Geneviève, and National Bank, we appreciate you so much and your dedication to conversations like these. I'd also like to welcome the Executive Director of Right to Play's Indigenous Programs to the space. Rachel, please tell us a bit about yourself and the allyship you're working on with Right to Play.
Awesome. Miigwech, thank you. And thank you, Geneviève. And thank you to National Bank. First off, I just want to say Miigwech, thank you to everyone here today, Reeta, Gabrielle, and Taylor. And thank you for sharing your space and your time with us. And I know that the participants that are here or watching today will learn from listening to your own stories. And miigwech to the Right to Play team, including Laura and the team that you don't see on the screen, who are bringing us here together today. Thank you so much. So my name is Rachel Mishnin. I am the Executive Director for Right to Play Indigenous Programs here in Canada. And I joined Right to Play in 2020, and it's just been over a year. And I have, in that time, been able to witness and watch amazing, innovative, creative, caring people partner with others across Canada, delivering play-based programming in communities across Canada. It's been a privilege to witness, to see the change of programming to adapt to a time of COVID, to a time when children felt alone and felt isolated. And it's been great to witness how the team had worked in partnership and alongside community mentors across Canada to continue to deliver safe play-based programming within their communities. And I just feel that this journey that we're on is an ongoing journey. It's not one that's going to end anytime soon. And I believe that reconciliation for me is about friendship. And it's about building relationships and maintaining those relationships. It isn't just a land acknowledgement. It isn't just one thing that you do. It isn't just one book that you read. It's a journey in itself to learn about the history of this country, and to learn about the first peoples of this country and the relationship that they have, that we have with the Canadian government and with Canadians. Now is the opportunity to create change and to make a different path forward. And I'm grateful for all of you who are on that journey with us. It is through these friendships and these relationships that we will continue to maintain that will provide us the opportunity and the space to create change, and to continue supporting children and youth across Canada in play-based programming that we deliver. My name, Rachel Mishenene, comes from Mishkegogamang First Nation. I am Ojibwe and French mix. I am also customarily adopted into Eabametoong First Nation, and I currently reside in Thunder Bay and have the opportunity to, witness and see a great team of people working across Canada virtually in delivering play-based programming and looking at ways that we can continue to support each other as we move forward in reconciliation. And so with Right to Play has been celebrating 10 years of being in Canada, and through the request of two First Nation communities, Right to Play partnered with in 2010. The programs have continued to grow, and our partnerships and connections with Indigenous communities have continued to grow, and our friendship and relationships continue to grow in that as well. In moving forward in the next 5 years, the Indigenous Programs team, and with the support of donors like National Bank and other donors and allies and friends, and in partnership with Indigenous community people and organizations, we are going to be embarking on a 5-year journey into a new strategic plan, which will include youth leadership, looking at the current play program, developing and looking at an adaptable land-based program, developing an education program for teachers, as well as ways that Right to Play can respond to crisis during a time of need. And as you know, there have been the the graves that have been founded on residential school sites, and this has impacted communities and people across Canada. And looking at ways that we can provide any type of support in those times of need and when requested. Again, all in partnership with Indigenous people. Anything that is created for Indigenous people must be created with Indigenous people. But I want to just thank everyone for taking the time today out of your evening to participate and listen and learn and grow. And I encourage you to continue your journey in reconciliation and to step out of your comfort zone and to continue learning. Miigwech, and thank you again to the panelists, and miigwech to everyone here today.
Miigwech, Rachel. Thank you very much. Now I'm super excited to be able to introduce our esteemed panel. Taylor, Reeta, and Gabrielle are each very powerful voices in Indigenous leadership and in youth spaces. So thank you so much for being here with us. And I'm just going to start by asking you each to introduce yourselves. Taylor, can we start with you?
Absolutely. Masi Laura. Nega Dagon D Sadzikla Taylor Behn-Tsakoza Ote. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Taylor Behn-Tsakoza. I am Dene from the Fort Nelson and Proper River First Nations. My communities are located up here in northeastern BC and are both signatories to Treaty Number 8. And that is also where I'm calling in from today. I'm very fortunate to not only be an employee of Right to Play. I'm currently a program officer for the Indigenous Programs, but I also do a lot of different things. And I think at the heart of all the work I do, I try my hardest to either create space for Indigenous youth to be heard, or to simply just if there is space, just finding ways to make that space bigger and more inclusive, and just a place for Indigenous youth to be, I think, included, heard, and listened to. And I think one position I really am honored and just grateful to hold is back in June, I was appointed to the co-chair position of the National Youth Council at the Assembly of First Nations. And in that position, I'm essentially a spokesperson and a voice for First Nations youth across the country. It's a big role, and it's a big, I think, opportunity to keep bringing this energy and this, I think, this drive to have First Nations youth, Indigenous youth heard at the decision-making table and a part of, essentially what our future is going to be like. I always, when I'm in meetings with our national chief, with different political leaders, with elders, I'm like, one day we're going to be in your positions. How can we best serve youth to be well-equipped to sit in those positions one day? And so that's essentially the goal of what I try to do. But that's, I don't know, a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and again, just really honored to be here.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And I know I'm already, just knowing you for a short while, have been inspired by you and learn from you as well. So thank you. Gabby, can I go to you next?
For sure. So Ani Bojo Tanchakiwa Mishen Dengwe Anquat Quindish Nakaz Pakjahanse and Don Juba Sputnow and Don Juba Omamawene Nishnabe King and Don Chi Makwando Dam Nisame Dana Asha Niswe Indiso Babonwe Machifandao Otipamesawakandao A7G and Donoki. So hi everyone, my name is Gabrielle Fayant. I'm originally from Alberta. My family comes from Fishing Lake Métis settlement. Really proud to come from the settlements. We have such a rich and amazing history, and just really beautiful people. But like many Indigenous folks, I've definitely been displaced from my homelands. And so I am now a guest in the traditional territory, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin peoples, also known as Ottawa. And so this is definitely my home away from home, and that's just a reality of a lot of Indigenous folks. We have to make our home away from home in different places. In urban environments, there's many of us that live in urban settings. I said a whole bunch of things. Most is just like an announcement. I don't need to like explain all of it, but that's the gist of what I said in Anishinaabe. And I'm the co-founder and helper with Assembly of Seven Generations, or also known as A7G. And we're a super grassroots youth organization. We've been just trucking along at it since 2015, 2014 around. And we do a lot of land-based programming. We do a lot of mental health crisis intervention. We just support Indigenous young people however they need it. And we do a lot of peer-to-peer support and things like that. And there's like a whole bunch of things we do that I always forget to mention, but I hope I can get into some of it today. So miigwech, chai hai, thanks for having me on this panel.
Miigwech, Gabby, thank you. And if you folks are looking for a way out there to learn more, I honestly think that Gabby and Assembly of Seven Generations is a great way to learn. It's a place that I learn from on Twitter all the time of what's going on in the Indigenous world. And I'll throw it to Reeta to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone. Okay. Watching Misueg, Gabs American, Mishtobo, Reeta Kosstachin, Dishnakasin, Omushkegowuk, Enunil, Gasho, Diskanisian, Inanaskamal, Gishimento, Opagajima Hataguk, Mishkegogamang. Hi everybody, my name is Reeta. I also introduce myself as with my spirit name, which is White Wolf. I was told it signified leadership qualities, and I want to thank Gabby for like being the reason why I'm here today to speak with everybody. I've been a guest on Unsurrendered, Unceded Anishinaabe since 2017, and I go to school at U Ottawa. And yeah. Oh, I forget what else. Sorry, I'm done.
Laura, you're muted.
Goodness, it was because there were dogs barking in the background. So before we start, and you know, every internet meeting of any sort, you need to have one person muted at some point. So to start, I wanted to just set up a little bit about why we're even having this conversation. So Thursday is the first ever National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which was created because of the uncovering of hidden graves of murdered Indigenous children at residential schools. Prior to this year, it was referred to as Orange Shirt Day, which was recognized and used to raise awareness of the impacts of residential schools. The reality is that truth is very uncomfortable and reconciliation is going to be very hard. And today we're hopefully going to talk about both. I am not obsessed, but somewhat in love with a book called Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Mohawk writer Alicia Elliott. And in that book, she has a quote that says, "And if intergenerational trauma can alter DNA, why can't intergenerational love?" And today I wanted to touch on the two parts of that sentence. In the first part, she is referring to the recent research that trauma can be passed down from parents to child prior to birth, referred to as intergenerational trauma. And I once heard this referred to by an elder as polluting a river, and that as it drifts down the river, it impacts the ecosystem, dilutes in some spaces and concentrates in others. So the first question I'm going to turn to the panel is, what are the ripple effects of residential schools that you have seen, that you're still experiencing, that our people are experiencing? And maybe, Gabby, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Laura. That's a really important question. I really think that a lot of people just think of residential schools in the past, but you're 100% right. It has had a huge ripple effect on the generation that didn't attend residential schools and the descendants of those survivors. So my family is about 4 generations of survivors that attended residential schools, day schools, industrial schools, convents, whatever you want to call these places. It's really important to also realize that Canada didn't just decide to apologize for residential schools. Canada was taken to court and they were forced to apologize. There was a settlement that was forced. They were held accountable and there was justice. And that's where a lot of these other initiatives and public awareness come from. So I think it's really important to acknowledge this, that we're still waiting for justice. We're still waiting to see these changes that we need. And so as a descendant of folks that went to these places, I don't even want to call them schools, these really horrible places, I suffered from severe depression, from addictions. And when I was younger, I faced suicide. And luckily, I was able to get through that. I really believe that my relatives and my ancestors have always been looking out for me. But a part of that is also acknowledging that I didn't actually know that my family had these experiences. No one actually told me. It was only until I was about 19 and I was an intern at the Aboriginal Healing Foundation that I learned about residential schools for the very first time. And that's when I started to do research and I learned about intergenerational impacts. And when I learned about intergenerational impacts, I saw myself. And it was really hard to hear that truth and to see that reflection of myself. But it actually helped me empower myself. And so, I've been really fortunate to be sober for the last 9 years. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to break that cycle of trauma. Not that I still don't struggle with these traumas, but there was some of them that I was like, okay, I can break this. I really can. And that's why community is so, so important. If it wasn't for community and ceremonies and my peers, I wouldn't have been able to get through it. And so we see that today as well. Like a lot of young people I work with are still struggling with the same things I was struggling with. And we hear a lot of people talk about reconciliation and they're really concerned about wearing orange shirts, but we're still carrying the burden of this trauma, and it's really not fair.
Thank you so much, Gabby. And I think something you touched on there really resonates with me is that we, because of the hiding, the way that history has been hidden, we have had our history hidden from us, and we don't sometimes realize what we're carrying and why certain things impact us in a certain way. So thank you. Taylor, can I go to you?
Yeah, good question. I was thinking as you were talking about like this idea that, and it's actually not an idea, it has been proven that trauma can be passed down through DNA. And I've actually, I met with a Cree Métis elder, Carrie Moore in Calgary when I was going to school there. And she, at one of like an Indigenous youth like leadership workshop that she presented at, she was talking about the epigenetics. And so it's the idea of your DNA changing due to trauma. And she was sharing with us that there was studies done with like music, and when like the beat of like certain songs, and especially like drumming, changes like the rhythm in your brain, or like so basically it's like it's a way that they were finding was really helpful in like a treatment for like for trying to treat or I guess deal with trauma. So I thought like to me that was like culture. That was how we could try and like combat all these like generations of just trauma and I think abuse and hurt was like through culture. And so I mean, I could go on and on and on about what I've learned in that workshop, but I think that part of it alone for me reminded me that, you know, it was, I mean, that was the whole point of residential schools, was like breaking us from our families and our communities and our culture. Because that's what kept us strong, was like being together and celebrating and just being really proud of who we were. And so, I mean, the ripple effects are many. I don't even want to name them because I know everyone, when you're walking, when I was in Calgary, you walk downtown Calgary, you see it. You walk downtown Vancouver, it's even more prevalent. And I think, yeah, it's just this like ripple effects of just hurt. And I think like hurt that was done to us, but now what we do with that hurt is like we do it to each other. And it's just this like vicious cycle of just not knowing what to do with that. And so, yeah, when I think of like, we're going into this inaugural National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, it's like, what does that mean? You know, how is that contributing to tackling these ripple effects that we have been experiencing, that we experience every day as Indigenous people? And I think it's, yeah, I think, and again, it was when I was in Calgary. I am forgetting his name. He's a well-known elder in Calgary, but he was saying that, like, you know, it's truth and reconciliation. Truth comes before reconciliation. And I think that's what September 30th is about, is like, because there's so many people that I've seen in my own life or on Facebook that's like, I just didn't know. And I mean, to some extent, I believe them. There's like friends, like parents of my friends who were just like, I had no idea that was happening, that it did happen, that those effects that continue to, like, even though residential schools are closed, they're still very much, I think, prevalent in the sense that those legacies are still being perpetrated through systems and policies and all these things. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think what you touch on of that truth needs to be said, and that it's not, Gabby mentioned, it's not in the past. It's even residential schools themselves. The last one closed in 1996. So I'm going to age myself for a second, but that meant I could have been at it. I could have been in that school. And that's insane to think about it, when people think it's in the past and that it's something that happened in history. Not only that, that means that our parents, our grandparents, their grandparents, it happened for generations, that folks would take into schools. So it really is so very current right now. Reeta, what are the ripple effects that you've seen from residential schools?
Okay, so I don't know, it's getting pretty heavy. It's a heavy week, definitely. So I would just like to go back to what Taylor was saying. One of the things I like to address is the fact that intergenerational trauma always felt like a feeling rather than like something you can put like a name to. Like it's something like deep within inside like yourself that like is in pain. And when you're being down or just like living life and like a topic comes up, like you feel like something deep within you. And it's just I don't know how to explain it, but like it's always a feeling to me, and like I never really knew how to place it when I was younger, but like growing up now, I definitely understand it a lot more. Since community is like a strong thing in like Indigenous communities, I can say that I was raised by many survivors. I'm the first generation that has not attended the IRS systems. The first glimpse I got into it was, I think I was like 3, and we were swinging me and my dad, we were swinging like somewhere nearby the St. Anne's Indian Residential School, and I saw the way he looked at it. There was pain, and there was anger, and like it's like situations like that where like I first saw it. So like since my family is still healing, I like a lot of the things that I learned about it was like self-taught. So yeah, but I've been working on it. I think the ripple effects are very different across Turtle Island. For my reserve, I'm just gonna start listing them off because I know a lot of reserves across like the nation can like relate to it. So like in my reserve, there's like a lot of social issues, infrastructural issues, and education issues. For education, like we're years behind in education. Like if you're in grade 6, you're probably learning grade 4 curriculum, like around there. For social issues, there's like a lot of things. Like a lot of it includes like oppression, confusion, suicide epidemics, and loss of languages. And like, we see it in our youth today. I really like I really like bringing like light to youth because like they're struggling a lot, but like we also lean on each other, and that's what we do at A7G. We learn from each other, and I think that's like really powerful. So infrastructural, like on my reserve, there's like a lot of overcrowding in our housing, and there's not enough housing, and like there's no clean water. There's boil water advisories. My auntie wouldn't tell us, but like it actually like affected her a lot, and I just learned about it like the other day. And yeah, like I'm sorry to like list all these issues, but like that's the reality, especially like in situations where like a nation has like a lot of isolated reserves or reserves that are like far up north. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you for sharing. And I think we've kind of been taught to be sorry for telling the truth, and I don't think you need to be. I think you can speak that truth and say, this is where colonization has gotten us. And something you said, the way you contextualize intergenerational trauma as a feeling is a really important way to put it. I remember the first time I had a counselor who asked me what in being Indigenous meant to me. And my first gut thought was pain, which is horrifying. It's horrifying that is the first thought that you think of your culture. And unfortunately, that's the feeling that some of us carry, right? But we're all, as you mentioned, on a healing path and wandering our path of figuring out our healing and our community's healing. And so I'll pivot to the second part of Eliot's quote, where she says, again, the quote was, if intergenerational trauma can alter our DNA, why can't intergenerational love? And one of the reasons I love this quote is that talk of intergenerational love, I think, really touches on the healing path forward, at least how I conceptualize it. So what is our path forward in supporting Indigenous youth towards healing? How can we all help? How can Indigenous folks help? But also, how can anyone watching this help as well? What is the path you folks see? And maybe I'll switch up the order and go to Taylor first.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, what is our path forward is a great question. I think, especially when like thinking about Indigenous youth, and I'll share this story about when, like back in May, when a lot of our relatives and just the children of who attended Indian residential school were being recovered. It was like the entire nation was grieving. We were all grieving, and I didn't think it was going to hit me as hard. I know when I first saw it, I was like, oh wow, like that's crazy, like 215, like that's a lot, like but then it was like the days, like that the days afterwards, like the weeks afterwards, when it was like a discussion happening on like Facebook and even in my own family, and I had just hearing the stories from some of my aunties and uncles who attended Lower Post residential school, just sharing stories I've never heard before, and I was like, what? Just in tears, just listening to them share, and just hearing like them say like, well, no one would believe us if we said anything, and they're going into their 50s and 60s now, and I'm like just them just holding on to that for so long. And so I thought to myself, I was like, here I thought I was like doing all this healing work. I've been sober for 2 years. I go to counseling every week. I rely on my culture when I need it. I'm really self-aware. But then when like news like that comes along, it's unexpected. It just felt like, it's like, what did I do all that healing for? It's like, what did I do all that breaking all these cycles for? And I was like, I mean, I know like no one could have prepared like the nation for what was about to be, what story was about to be told, the truth that was about to be told when Kamloops had shared that. So, I mean, I try to be kind to myself in that sense, but when I think about this question, what is our path forward? I think it's like that kindness. I think kindness is our path forward. I think, just, and especially for our youth, I know we're, like for some of us, like same with Reeta mentioned, she's the first generation that didn't go to residential, so am I. And I think, we're really trying to, take those, like the stories I hear from my aunties and uncles, like I'm trying to take that and trying to do something with that. And for me, it's, sitting at the AFN and really advocating for language revitalization projects and grants to be more accessible to youth. So I know a lot of grants, you have to be part of an organization or you have to be a registered charity. And it's like, well, there's youth like in community who just want to like hand out care kits, who just want to like have a barbecue with their elders. And, that's healing. That's like, and some of those stories like never make the news, and that's okay. And that's like, that's preferred. It's like, it's not the big things that happen, which I'm like very thankful for all the events that are like being broadcasted on Thursday. Like those are important, but it's also like just those little things that matter to the youth who I think are just living, just trying to survive, I guess, trying to get out of survival mode. And that's just like having programs and services that are really accessible and that meet them where they're at, and not trying to like mold them into something, not trying to push healing on them, I guess. It's just letting them lead the way, I think, is how we move forward, is it being youth-led and it being done in a kind way.
Yeah, that's so fair. And your reflections around the findings from Kamloops, I remember the kindest thing someone did for me was phone me that day and just be like, are you okay? And touch in, which was very kind. Because there were two things. There was mourning for our children and mourning for the family that we might have lost, and we don't know because we've lost our histories. And also the realization that people who ran the schools are still alive and walking our streets with us, which was terrifying. And there's little ways of healing that are so important. This family meals and meeting folks where they're at and just being like, what do you need? And I was lucky to have a friend be able to phone and be like, what do you need today? And that was what I needed. So thank you. Gabby, can I go to you?
For sure. I just wanted to kind of go back to that point about what intergenerational love looks like. And right away I think about my cookum, like automatically. And so to me, intergenerational love is all those beautiful skills and feelings and ways of being that our cookums and our parents and our aunties and uncles and so on have passed on to us. And so my cookum was really known as like the rock of Fishing Lake. And when our family got to Fishing Lake, she did everything in her power to create a really good reputation for our family. She was like a seamstress. She was an undertaker. She was a midwife. She was a medicine woman. She was an administrator. She did all these things. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't actually know it until quite recently. But I took on a lot of those skills and I kind of embodied a lot of her. And that's what I do with A7G. I do so many things, like I can't even keep track of all the things I do. But it's really because of her. Like she taught me that. And I'm her namesake. So my full name is Gabrielle Victoria Fayant, and my cookum's name was Victoria Fayant. So I take that really seriously, and I have so much love. I have so much love that goes the other way too. There's that intergenerational love that comes down, but I also have so much love for my ancestors. But in terms of like moving forward from all of this, it's Indigenous people should not be carrying the burden of residential schools. It's really ridiculous to even like play into that narrative. It's like someone abused you, and then all of a sudden you're doing the work that the abuser should be doing to apologize to you and to reconcile. That's what's literally been happening for the last however long, 5 years or so, when Canadians started talking about reconciliation. We've had to carry the burden of that. And even just as Taylor was talking, it to me, it sounded like Taylor's community really came forward and supported, not Canadians coming forward and supporting our struggles. So 100%, like, Canadians need to step up. It's really out of control. We need to look past just like wearing orange shirts and having like a national day. We need support all year round, and we wouldn't be experiencing these types of traumas if it wasn't for actions that Canadians took and have benefited from. And so when people say residential schools happen in the past and to get over it, it's like, no, actually, Canadians are still benefiting from the fact that Indigenous peoples have lost their connection to their lands and their homelands and their relatives. So I'm always encouraging folks, if you're rich and wealthy and you're Canadian, give some land back. Like literally just a couple acres. I know that you're all sitting on farms. Give some land back. Share your power. That's another part of this is we don't want to be victims. And so we don't want people telling us how we have to get through this and how we should heal. We should be supported and we should see retribution without strings attached. Right now, we see a lot of like white saviorism. And so what that looks like is, oh, I'll give you some money, but as long as you do it like this, or as long as you do your healing in this way. So meet people where they're at. Stop judging Indigenous peoples for where they're at. A lot of where we're at when you see someone that's houseless, that's a reflection of residential schools, and so believe young people, believe folks, and honor them. We've been through so much. So that's, to me, that's the way forward. I think that Indigenous peoples have been through enough and that folks need to meet us halfway for this to work.
Yeah, 100%. Like, just snaps everywhere for that as well. It's too often that we were, through the Indian Act, made the wards of the state, the children of the state. And since that moment, people have been treating us like children, like we cannot take care of ourselves, and we can't take care of our land, and we can't take care of our people. And that just needs to be erased from our thought process and the thought process of Canadians in general. Reeta, how about you? Path forward healing.
I'm super pumped right now. Thanks, everybody. Your words are so great. Yeah, like we don't fit in these colonial structures. Like if you take a look at like the government right now, there's separate departments for Indigenous affairs or Indigenous infrastructure. Why aren't we like, we have to go to them instead of the real people? Because like it's like they're over here and then they're just like a little branch like off. It's kind of the same, but like they're not like the main people who handle it, but we have to go through them to get to the main ones. And like it's like you can like, it's like they're trying to be like, oh no, we have this for you, but like it's not really for us because we still have to go through a lot just to get basic needs, or just like, I don't know, anything really. Anyways, back to the question. I'm sitting here with some sweetgrass because it helps you clear your mind, and I'm like nervous. So, but the teachings around the sweetgrass that I got were there's 21 sweetgrass blades. You take 7, 7, 7, and you start braiding them, and it's about honoring like the 7 generations before you, and the 7 teachings that you live like everyday life, and then thinking ahead into the future for like the newer 7 generations that are to come. And like that really relates back to the question, just because like we didn't only inherit our ancestors' trauma, we also inherited their strength, their love, their power. And yeah, like you can see in today's youth, like I saw this TikTok earlier, and like it was just like, it made me realize like a lot of the youth today are like the ones really given that role, just because like a lot of our families are like still healing, and there's like problems with languages, like we don't really know our languages, but like, so we're trying to like recover that, but like the responsibility is falling on our youth. That's just an example. But yeah, for like non-Indigenous people, I think just like, I like what Gabby said, like you have to hold yourself accountable for like in every aspect of your life. It's the little microaggressions that like really like hold us down. Like you don't really know it, but like it's like recollecting. Yes. I think once you get past that part of it, it's about like educating yourself. You take initiative and you learn for yourself, and I think you should learn about the area you live in. A lot of the nations across the Turtle Island are different. Like Huron and Anishinaabe is completely different from like the Mi'kmaq, who are like Atlantic, and like the West Coast, because like there's different histories of like settler colonialism there, and like different timelines of colonization. And, like you can really see it in like modern nations today. So like every nation is like what's that word? Special in their own way. Yeah. And just yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful hearing from you folks, because it also reminds me of the strength that we have going back through our generations. And sometimes we need that reminder that we are strong because of who stands behind us and around us, which it's just like listening to your words around the sweetgrass teaching, Reeta, it really brought light to my day. So thank you so much. We have some questions, and I'm hoping to, we'll do the same thing, go around the room. We'll see how many we get to in the time we have. And the first question, I think, is really important to start and center, which is, what advice do each of you have for other Indigenous youth out there who are searching for healing right now? So do you have any advice for other Indigenous youth out there? And Rachel's going to join us back in here to help answer some of the questions. But maybe I'll start with you, Taylor.
Yeah. Oh, advice. Oh, sorry, I was rereading the question. Yeah, I think just, I don't know. I would just say, like, do what's right for you. I know, like, although I'm sober and I have a lot of friends that are, and they love to post about it and really not push it, but it just, like, subtly is like, you should be sober too, you know? But for some people, they don't need to be, and that's okay. I think just, like, whatever feels right for you, that's what you should do. So that would be my advice.
Gabby, how about you?
It's so individual. Like, everybody's experience, like, reconnecting to community is so different. But one thing I would really recommend is, like, take your time. I know that when you maybe are trying to reconnect and you see, like, all these things about, you know, Indigenous people, and you just want that connection so bad because it was stolen from you. I know how, like, that urgent it feels, but you still have to take your time. There's a lot of things that we learn through capitalism, through colonization, that when we run back into community with those ideologies attached to us, it can actually harm communities. And so remember that communities are not a place for you to extract knowledge from. If you want knowledge, you have to give back. It's a process of reciprocity. And so, you know, be gentle, take your time, and definitely, like, learn to laugh at yourself. Like, I don't know, if you come to A7G, like, we just make fun of each other all the time, like, in a nice way, but but we still, like, tease each other all the time. And if you can't laugh at yourself, like, you're gonna take it personal and you're gonna get angry. And so, yeah, just check your ego, check your pride, and learn through observation. And yeah, be gentle with yourself.
Miigwech, thank you. How about you, Reeta?
Okay. Yeah, it's, like, really individual. I think that there's no real way to be Indigenous, like, one set way. It's kind of like, do it, whatever feels good. For traditional lifestyles, there's different kinds also. Like, there's the ceremonial, there's land-based. There's also a mix of the two if you would like. But I know for me that I only had a little bit of the ceremonial teachings growing up, and I had a lot of land-based, like, teachings, and it just looks different on everybody. And I really think for, like, if you're going to reconnect as a youth, you should really be ready to, like, throw yourself into a new community, because it's that strength that where you get to lean into each other that really helps. I know at A7G we come from, like, all around, and, like, we learn from each other, and we give each other our own teachings from, like, different nations, and we all kind of learn that way. And it encourages us to, like, learn our own teachings from our own nation, to bring it back to our friends. And, like, it's really slow. I'm always reminded that change is slow, because the generations before us had been fighting for visibility and, like, for rights, like, for the longest time, ever since. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't speak enough to what Reeta just touched on, which is, like it's slow, but also take the step if you're feeling alone and you don't know where to go to, take the step to walk into spaces that will help guide you. I know that the first time I walked into Indigenous services at Western University, I was terrified that no one would want me there. And it ends up being that community that you need, the folks that will guide you and help you, and take that fear and just kind of tuck it away and take the first courageous step if you can. The next question, I'm going to go to Rachel first for, because I love this question. Do you have any go-to books, podcasts, or video recommendations recommended to in relation to truth and reconciliation to recommend?
Definitely there. And one of the things, first of all, thank you all, Miigwech, for sharing and having these conversations around intergenerational trauma, but also looking forward and making sure that we're not staying in that place, because we also come from a legacy of survival and such strength in that, and we're moving forward in that, and we move forward together. And yes, learning ourselves about who we are and where we come from and about each other is a part of that learning, and learning takes time. In terms of like podcasts, one of the shows that I really liked was CBC Radio's Revision Quest with Daryl Dennis, based out of Manitoba. He uses a very easy, light, fun way to engage and learn about certain protocols, to learn about the Indian Act, to learn about treaties, but also uses humor in that space to learn and grow. So if you check out CBC, there are other podcasts that are also available there. And looking at Indigenous book owners, like goodminds.com also has multitudes of books written by Indigenous people. And I think that's the important piece, is whether it's films that you're watching or going to film festivals, and I know many of you are based in Toronto, is looking at, attending the Imagine Native Film Festival, because a lot of that is stories. These are films and documentaries made by Indigenous people globally. And the one thing with that global aspect is, because of colonialism, there is that attachment that what happened here happened there also in other parts of the world, like Australia, like New Zealand, like the United States. So take a peek through some of the film festivals, as well as the National Film Board. Again, a lot of great films that are captured there. And these are stories. And that is one of the ways that we learn, is actually through stories. That is our traditional way of learning, is through stories. There weren't books in our culture. It was about listening. It was about watching. It was about doing. And that's the piece that I think that when you start to engage to stories that you're listening, such as this, or going to events, or reading books, or listening to podcasts, or watching films, that's the place that you're going to learn. And that's the space that you'll also recognize how our cultures are so diverse and our worldviews are so diverse, but also looking inward. Look inward and look at how you have grown in the values that you have today based on your own culture. Think about your own history and how your family got here today. And think about the differences when you're learning about Indigenous people, of your family's relationship with Canada and our relationship as Indigenous people with Canada, and how those opportunities were not equitable in that space. So part of reconciliation to me is not just learning it, but it's also looking inward and looking outward again, and looking, what can I do different? What can I actually change within myself to really move forward in reconciliation?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm going to be like so excited and also empowered after this, by the way. I also want to shout out Assembly of Seven Generations has a resource page on their website. If you go to resources and you go to reports, I would highly recommend reading their Indigenous Youth Voices Roadmap to the TRC 66, which is referring to the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 66. So go there, read it. It's a good read and really important to kind of understand that position as well. Anyone else, and I'll go open floor, have a resource or a book or a podcast that they would listen to? I have so many I love, but anyone else has anything, feel free to come off mute. Okay.
If possible, I would like to talk about the relationship aspect as well. In regards to, there was a really good question that came up in terms of how will Right to Play ensure that Indigenous programs are aligned with values with Indigenous community partners that we have. That's a really important piece. There's a saying that is not about us without us. So anything that is created about Indigenous people should include Indigenous people. And it's not about us coming in and taking over, or an organization coming in and taking over. It has to be an equitable relationship. And relationships take time to build, just like any relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship. In that relationship, trust has to be established. And those perspectives of that come in that space need to be worked out and need to be on the same page as to what are we going to do? What can we do? What resources do I have? What resources do you have? Where should we come together? And what is the purpose for? It's really important that non-Indigenous organizations include Indigenous people in anything that relates to Indigenous people. That's at the bottom, at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. So just making sure that our perspectives and our presence is present in those spaces when it involves us.
Miigwech, yes. And that includes, I'm learning a lot from Gabby and Reeta and Taylor as well, of like making sure that not only Indigenous folks, Indigenous youth are there. If you're making decisions about Indigenous youth, have Indigenous youth there, and a variety of them making decisions as well, and real decisions as well. And on that uplifting note, I hope everyone has learned something. We did cover a lot, and I want to thank everyone for being present and being here. A huge chi miigwech to our amazing panelists and special guests. Taylor, Reeta, Gabby, Rachel, Genevieve, you all inspire me and will lift my day up today. And thank you to everyone who made time to listen today as well. The journey to truth and reconciliation is that it's a journey. We're all learning. We're all on a path. And so what I want to challenge you is to think about reconciliation as action. It is a process of standing in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. Allyship is a verb. You have to do things in order to connect to solidarity and allyship. So some simple ones is, yes, wear your orange shirt on September 30th. There's a step. But also look into information around Indigenous history. Look into the dialogues that are happening between Indigenous people. Look into reconciliation. And a new term that I've learned recently is Indigenous joy. Look into Indigenous joy and the beauty of our projects and our art, and some of the things that we're working on as well. So miigwech to everyone who joined us, and good night. And again, thank you to our panelists.